Well, welcome everyone. So thrilled you're here for What Growth is Made of podcast. I'd like to introduce you to our guest today, and it's Merle Marting. Merle founded Go and about 10 years ago to help companies create sustainable growth, value, and operational excellence to enhance the lives of owners, employees, families, and their communities. And I love that purpose. Go helps companies accelerate business growth from startups to middle market companies. During this time, Go has served over 200 clients and 30 PE firms. Prior to Go, Merle spent 25 years helping premier brands like Nike, Adidas, TaylorMade, and Callaway drive growth and profitability. So welcome, Merle.
Thank you, Margaret. Really appreciate it.
It was lovely having you in New York City last week at my CEO Peer Advisory Group. Your workshop was excellent. It really helped make what I would say this elusive topic of strategic planning into something very tangible and actionable for my leaders. So thank you for that.
Of course, it was so much fun, and you have just a great group, and it was a wonderful experience, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, well, good. It was great to have you there. So what I thought I would do, and I'm actually stealing this from your presentation, but I thought it was a really interesting quote from Forbes Magazine that 82% of Fortune 500 CEOs felt their organization did an effective job of strategic planning, but only 14% of that same CEOs say they did an effective job on implementing the strategy. So what I'd love to do, Merle, start with getting your view. I think it really does summarize the issue with strategic planning and why the numbers are so low. Would love to get your thought on why the numbers are so low around effectively implementing the strategy, and why is it so hard?
Margaret, it's a great question. And the reality is that all companies have this issue. This is just not something that's uncommon or unique to your company or one organization. It's all companies have this challenge. And there's a lot of factors that actually drive this particular challenge. One of the first things is alignment. A lot of times strategies may not be aligned to the organization's vision, mission, values, and goals, and that can lead to confusion and conflicts among many of the stakeholders internally. Another issue sometimes is complexity. Strategic plans are oftentimes complex and challenging. They have multiple objectives and initiatives. They have competing performance indicators, and that can make it really hard for teams to prioritize and coordinate their efforts seamlessly across an organization. Another item that has been identified is the uncertainty. Strategic plans are all based in the future. And while we know what's been in our past, we really don't and can't predict some of the unexpected changes and disruptions that may come up. And then how do you plan for that? How do you adjust for that? How do you allow flexibility there? Communication's another item that's been cited as bigger issues where if the plan isn't effectively communicated to everybody in the organizations, misunderstandings happen. Resourcing is another big challenge. Having the right resources, having the right skilled resources, that's people, time, and money. That can create a lot of issues as well. Road mapping, having specific detailed action plans. If you're not doing that, you're not going to have a well-coordinated execution. And then the last couple are usually around accountability, holding people accountable to those tasks. And the very last one is resistance to change. A lot of organizations and people in organizations, they've been successful and they're like, why should we change? Or why should we do anything different than we've done in the past? So that's a handful of reasons why it's oftentimes so difficult to implement a change, especially a transformational change for an organization.
It's so important. As you know, I'm a scaling up coach in addition to a Visage chair. And, you think about all companies need to focus on strategy, people, execution, and cash, right? Regardless of size, at some point or another, things pop up, and those are things. I always think about how important that strategic component is, in terms of just guiding, how do you move forward if people don't know where they're going? So I always think about that, but it is so true. How does a company have that kind of guiding light where they're going and make it tangible, but also flexible enough because there is so much uncertainty and has been for the last few years.
Well, and I think, Margaret, what you're really talking about there is a big issue that leaders need to focus in on when they're doing strategic planning. And there's really two components that they've got to break down the strategic plan into: the planning phase and then the execution phase. And what we oftentimes see leaders doing in that process is engaging deeply, which we want them to be engaged, but not distributing enough of the leadership to the organization so we can get buy-in from other groups and other resources across the organization. When a leader is going through the process of strategic planning, what they probably want to think about is, the first part of the strategic process involves getting the internal and external environments, gaining that understanding of the marketplace, competitors, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and being able to identify the gaps between where they're at today and where they want to go in the future. When a leader can do that and coordinate it and through a collaborative effort, they're going to get a better outcome in terms of the fuller picture of what today looks like, and then also what tomorrow could be when they distribute that. The second part of your equation is really about execution, and that is really about taking that master vision and master plan with all of those ideas as to where you want to going, and really developing a clear and actionable plan to achieve it. And that means getting very specific in terms of a roadmap, an action plan, steps, accountability, and all the rest of those elements, and holding that team accountable to that process.
It's really, we tend to put strategic planning in the same sentence, right? Or two words that go together, but it's really about strategic thinking and then execution, implementation of it. And they are, two different processes really at the end of the day. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I think it's a really important concept, and it's important for people to break it down. In fact, we've been doing this so much for organizations over the past decade that we've actually created 4 steps, almost a strategic planning life cycle, if you will. And we've created an acronym called GROW, which is goals, reality, opportunity, and waypoints. And what you can see in that process, it really does break down the strategic thinking down to the level of execution, if you will. On the goal side, it's really about creating a vision and specific areas of key performance indicators to track progress. On the reality, as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's about understanding where you're currently at today, and then being honest with your reality so that you can hopefully transform that into something bigger in the future. That's when you get into the opportunities where you're identifying those growth areas, new products, new markets, leveraging those strengths to gain a competitive advantage. And finally, the waypoints. That's really the execution. We call it work as well, developing those timelines with action plans, milestones, all the way down into who's accountable, who's doing what, when, and why.
And it's staying the course. I mean, it's in that last part. I love two of the things that really struck me both in the workshop we went through, but we've been talking about as well, is the reality, I think, is something that we're not always centered around. So I think that's really important. I mean, you could have a strategy and you're going to try to implement, but unless you have a really good feel of where you are today, it may be impossible. It'd be hard to motivate people, things like that. So I think that's a really good point. And then the other thing that struck me from last week when we were together is the whole SWOT analysis. And everyone would say, oh, I've done SWOT analysis before. But what I love what you guys do with your framework is you ask these questions underneath each of the components that, I at least would never have thought, oh, under strengths, those are really interesting questions. That's not where my mind went to. So I think that was also really helpful to kind of push the envelope of how to look at it in a little different light.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a really good point. most organizations, and we've all done in all of our leadership roles that we've had in companies, we've all done SWOT analysis, right? And we sit there with our teams and we say, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? And what are our threats? And after a few minutes, while you get a great start at things, and you're always good at the strengths, you're awesome at the weaknesses. You can always pick out, where you want to improve.
Right.
But when it gets to opportunities and threats, it gets harder and harder. So what we always recommend is dropping down even further and creating sub prompts that help you drive ideation. So, like in strengths, it might be, what do your customers love the most? What can you do less expensively? And literally go down and identify sub prompts in that process, in strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats that give you a more fuller and more robust perspective as to where you are at and your current reality.
And it really pushed the envelope in terms of thinking about that. As I said, when I think of SWOT, we've done it. It's a simple, but this forced people to think, wow, I never thought about it from that perspective. So I think that was really good and something very different.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, there's a lot of components to the framework and to strategic planning in general. What else? What are some other lessons learned, or what else would you like to share with the audience about your strategic framework? What's important, and some things that maybe they should be thinking about?
Yeah, we've been lucky to work with so many great organizations, especially Vistage members over the years, that we've been able to be students, if you will, and learn from those experiences. One of the things that we've found out is that historically, a CEO is really responsible for two key ideas. One is around direction, your strategic plan, and number two is around culture or people. In the first, around strategic plan, historically, strategic plans have been the CEO going off and thinking and writing and contemplating and giving consideration to the business. And it's worked well. But what we've noticed is, especially organizations that want to be transformational in their growth and really drive a material difference, there's a saying where if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And what we've learned is that a team-based strategic planning process allows you to go far. It takes a little bit more time at first to get everybody aligned and focused in on the things that are going to be most important. But ultimately, it allows you to exceed all of those objectives and outcomes that you had just as a single CEO-driven approach. So I think that's the biggest idea that we've learned is do it as a team. Use it as an opportunity to develop your staff members and distribute leadership. And it doesn't just have to be your direct reports. It can also be some of your leading talent you have in the organization. We're a big fan of the McKinsey 9-box talent matrix. And, a lot of times when you're thinking about how do I keep the very best talent? How do I develop my very best talent? You can get them involved in a strategic planning process that not only makes the process better, but also gives them a chance, those individuals on your team, a chance to grow.
Also with that, which I think is so important, is getting that diversity of thought. And when you look at, even from a SWOT perspective, getting diversity of thought in terms of what's going on out there that maybe we could disrupt, or what's disrupting us and how do we take advantage of that. So it's really, I think, having that collaborative approach allows you to have more diverse thought as you look at you're putting your plan.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm strong leaders. They say that your strengths cast shadows, and really strong leaders have big shadows. So to be able to shine light on those shadows, those potential weaknesses, having a diverse group of people that is surrounding that CEO is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for the important insights. I would love for you to just take a few minutes to share with the audience what services that Go offers and how you're helping companies accelerate their growth. And if someone wants to reach out to you to talk more about your framework, your tools, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the kind overview that you gave us at the very beginning. The way that Go has been building our business is really through helping drive strong growth plans, augmenting and professionalizing teams, and then applying best-in-class principles and practices over the last decade. We approach everything just like we suggest from a strategic planning on a team-based approach. So we'll bring teams of people in to help support organizations in their transformation. And we do work from strategic planning, research, product creation and management, brand and marketing strategy, sales optimization, digital platforms. And then we provide coaching and fractional support in all those areas. So we really focus in on the top of the P&L and focusing in on the growth curve, if you will. And we've just been very fortunate to work with incredible companies and have had outstanding outcomes because of that collaboration. If folks want to get a hold of me, they can always drop me an email at merle.marting@growwithgo.com. And we'd love to hear from them.
Great, but I love the Merle Marting as a Margaret Morrison, the MMs. So it's great. Also, as I said early on, this is such an elusive topic that just to have a partner in crime in terms of helping as a leader, having someone there to really help you walk through the process makes it a lot less complex and a lot less scary. So you guys have some great experiences. I know the CEOs in my group thought it was just a really helpful, great session, and I know you'll be hearing from some of them as well. So I wanted to leave the podcast with a great quote, actually, that you shared from Thomas Edison. Good fortune is what happens when opportunity meets with planning. So thank you all for joining today. This is the stuff that growth is made of.